You are listening to The Radar, a weather-related podcast hosted by the Valley's #1 meteorologists.
Well, hi there, everyone. Meteorologist Andrew DiPaolo here. Episode 2 of the Radar podcast, a podcast that brings you all things weather, not necessarily the forecast, the day-to-day forecast, but everything that impacts our weather forecast. And of course, when it comes to this time of the year, you're thinking allergies, right? It's springtime and you're probably seeing the trees bloom, maybe even some leaves on the trees, and you might start to be sniffling a little bit. So we brought in an expert. We've got Dr. Ben Broker with us, family medicine physician with Mercy Health. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming into our downtown Youngstown studio here.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. This is a great topic.
Yeah, and we were talking a little off camera. You said this time of the year you either deal with allergies or you deal with viruses. So let's talk a little bit about allergy season. Are we starting to see the ramp up of different allergies here in the Valley?
Yeah, so right now, April, May, the main pollens or the allergens you're going to see are going to be coming from tree pollen.
Okay. And as we make our way later into the season, what other allergies should we keep in the back of our minds that might have an impact on us personally?
So the main allergies that we're seeing around this time, again, they're going to be the seasonal allergies from the pollen.
Okay.
Like I said, April, May is going to be the tree pollen. June, like the beginning of summer, you're going to see grass pollen and allergies to that. And then once you get into like the September, October kind of thing, you're going to see allergies to weed pollen, ragweed pollen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about your yard, but my yard, we're starting to see the buds. We're starting to see the red buds on the driveway, which can kind of make things a little bit annoying. But we're all tracking some of these inside of our home as well. So how do we help prevent maybe getting the worst of these allergy symptoms?
So that is an excellent question. And so it's very tough. I can tell you a lot of the times when you look at allergies and seasonal allergies, the main things that you're going to be having are attacking your nose, they're attacking your mouth and your throat. And so you get these pollen or these allergens that enter in there. And so you get a cascade of events. Immunology-wise, you're getting a lot of congestion, you're getting a lot of runny nose, drainage, and all that stuff. And you're having all of that stuff to protect you because your body sees this harmless thing as harmful for allergies. It's an overreaction of the immune system. And so that's what's going on. So if you want to look at it from that perspective of, hey, how do I protect my nose? The first thing that you can do is try and avoid it completely, but who's gonna do that? What, are you gonna move to, I don't know, Alaska or something like that? So you can't really do that. So the first thing that you want to do is try and lessen the exposure. And so if you like going outside, that's fine. Go outside. But if you're like, hey, I don't really like going outside, go outside less, because again, you're getting that from the pollen, those allergens on the trees and the grass. And so you can go outside less. The main thing that I kind of talk about with patients is indoors. What are you doing when you get indoors? So you go outside, all right? The pollen's all over you. It gets in your nose, it gets in your mouth and all that stuff. It also gets on your clothes, right? So you come inside, one of the first things you should do is change your clothes, okay? Change into new clothes that don't have that pollen on them. Another thing you can do, if you really, really want to get all the pollen off of you, you can wash your face so you can take a shower. A lot of the times I'm telling people, hey, do not go lay down after you come inside, because again, if you lay down, you got the pollen on you, you just got it on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It gets on the furniture, it gets on the bedding, and if you don't scrape that stuff off, it stays there. Right. And again, it can further infect your nose.
I'm sure some simple cleaning around your house too probably would do the same trick.
Same thing. And so there is that. Other ways, people, when it's nice out, people like to open the windows, right? Well, if you open the windows, the pollen from outside comes inside. And so I tell people, close the windows. They're just going to bring in pollen. And again, it's not going to help unless you do close it.
Sure.
Another thing you can think about is something like an air filter.
Yeah.
And so people are like, well, what about a humidifier? Humidifier actually puts more pollen into the air if it's on the carpet or anything like that. A little more exposed you
That's interesting.
To.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing. Air filters are good, like I said. And then another thing is, hey, you have carpet, pollen gets in the carpet. Sweep the carpet.
Yeah. I mean, these are pretty simple things that we could do. And I mean, I feel like most of the time a lot of us do it, maybe not on a daily basis,
Right.
but on a weekly basis. But these are kind of things that we can add to our routine to help eliminate those, maybe the worst of the symptoms from these seasonal allergies. But as far as different medicines that we can take, over-the-counter medicines, what are some of the things that we can maybe stop at a drugstore and grab to help us out a little bit if we really feel maybe the worst of the allergy seasons, or the seasonal allergies rather?
Yeah, and so that's a great question. The truth of the matter is, I don't even want my patients to get there, right? I don't want them to be like, hey, I already have a flare-up of my allergies. I want to prevent that from happening.
Sure.
So what I tell them, and all of this stuff is over the counter, the first thing that I say is, hey, 2 to 3 weeks before your season where you get the allergies, go to the store, get something like fluticasone, Flonase.
Okay.
And it's a steroid nasal spray. And so you just do it once a day. Just spray it in your nose.
Yeah.
Some people have a hard time doing that, and the technique, if it's not good, it's not going to be helpful. And so when I talk to patients, I tell them, don't spray towards midline, spray outward. And then a lot of people, and I used to do this too before I actually watched this allergist talk about how to do it. A lot of people take that large sniff in.
Yeah.
It just goes right to the back of your throat.
Really?
It doesn't stay in the sinuses where all the allergies are.
Okay, so
and
aim it towards like the edge of your nostril then?
So you aim it in and out.
Okay.
Outward.
Okay.
Okay. Because midline's not going to be
And
good.
what does that do then?
So the
Where's that?
sinuses, if you look at the sinuses, there's sinuses here and there's sinuses here too, and there's sinuses up. So if you just spray midline, it's not going to really get into the sinuses well. And if you take like I said, a big sniff in, it's just going to go right to the back of your throat. So a lot of people are like, I feel it in the back of my throat when I do that. They're probably sniffing in too much. You take a little sniff in. And so, yeah, Flonase is a big one.
Time-wise, before you traditionally start to feel symptoms, I mean, are we talking a couple of weeks before?
I would say 2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks.
Before.
Okay.
And so a lot of the times people come in and they don't understand what's going on. You know, I'll have those people in urgent care and they'll say, hey, this happens the same time every year. I get the sinus infection.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's probably allergies. And so it's very hard to differentiate between allergies and something like an infection. When I see people, sometimes I don't know the difference between the two because the response you get between both of them is very similar. Again, that congestion, that postnasal drainage, coughing, sneezing, you know, a lot of the times, even in my notes, I'm saying, hey, this could be viral, this could be allergy related. Treatment's pretty similar. You know, treatment's going to be those nasal sprays, and then I'm sure we'll talk about the other stuff too.
Yeah.
But it's hard to differentiate.
Yeah. I mean, so we have different allergies, of course, here in the Valley, and you know, I was looking up some different stuff, and it seems like the especially central Ohio, southern Ohio, leaves are starting to come out anywhere from about 2 to maybe even 10 days early in the southern part of our state. So we're starting to see these allergies ramp up in your practice. Have you seen allergy season maybe start a little bit earlier every year or about the same time? Or is that tough to say?
It is tough to say. I can tell you. So the plants like sun. They like warm weather. And so if warm weather comes on earlier, it's going to predispose those plants to pollinate and pollen to go into the air, right? And so if a warm season comes on earlier, then you'll see that pollination earlier. And so this year, I mean, it seems like it's a similar, you know, we're in April right now. And so the trees, everybody looks at the trees, they see, you know, flowers on the trees, leaves in the trees. And so typical tree season right now.
Yeah. And, you know, we were talking about ragweed, we were talking about grass as well. And we're going to get into the warmer months here. You know, I mean, I would like it for it to be next week, but it's not going to happen,
I know,
Ben.
I
It's
wish.
not going to happen. So eventually it'll be warm, and the kids are going to be outside playing. Maybe they're playing baseball. If they're like me, they're in the outfield picking dandelions or not paying attention to what's going on. And that rolling around in the grass has an impact on them as well. I mean, is it the same thing for adults, or is there a different strategy as far as attacking allergies for kids?
So kids are a big deal, and I'm really glad you talked about it because, again, if you look at the anatomy of kids, their sinuses are smaller. The tubes that drain the sinuses, they're smaller. So I feel like allergies impact kids more. Actually, one of the things that you can see is if a kid has such a bad allergy, they snore at night. They can be predisposed to something like obstructive sleep apnea because, again, if you look at the throat, their throat is narrow, right? And so if you get inflamed throat, it makes it hard for them to breathe. So they can be sleep deprived. They can be tired. They can be irritated. There's studies that show if kids are treated well for their allergies, they do better in school. Because, again, I think a lot of it is, hey, they're coughing, staying up at night, not sleeping well. And so, kids especially can have those symptoms. There's a notorious symptom that we talk about because kids are constantly pushing their nose up. You'll see a line.
Okay.
And so you can see a line in their nose. Their eyes can be draining a ton. And so it's usually typically both eyes. Allergies, and this is one thing actually the allergist that I was listening to kind of harped on. If you think about, hey, you have this allergy to, I don't know, like a makeup. If you put it on your skin, you know how it becomes itchy?
Yeah.
That's what happens with allergies too.
Okay.
Like, hey, kids will be itching their nose, they'll be itching their eyes, and they can feel like the roof of their mouth is itchy. So that's one of the things that I use to differentiate between allergies or like, hey, you have some underlying infection.
Yeah, and I'm sure the attack plan might be similar to what we were talking about before. Maybe if they're dealing with allergies, have them shower or change their clothes as soon as they come in. But interesting point, and it makes sense. If they're irritated, if their eyes are running, maybe if they're not getting sleep, they're not going to do well in school. It's an interesting tie-in from allergies to maybe how they're performing in school.
Right. No, it definitely is. It's very, very important for kids. Like I said, it's just the tubing, everything on a kid is smaller. And a lot of the times kids have a hard time saying what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, if we are experiencing these symptoms, what point should we go see a doctor? At what point should we go to urgent care? And at what point maybe do we need some excess treatment for seasonal allergies?
And so, great question. I would say I would leave that up to the patient. If they ever have questions, it's always okay. The right answer is always okay. Go to your physician, talk to your physician, and see what they say. From my standpoint, and here's some stats that I will throw at you. 2.5% of doctor visits are related to seasonal allergies. There's 2 million lost school days to allergies. There's 6 million lost work days per year for allergies. And then there's 28 million restricted work days for allergies. And so it's very tough, but the truth of the matter is if you look at the over-the-counter medications, those are the things that I do when people come into urgent
It's not a
care.
secret.
And so,
It's not like you need to get like some crazy medication. You can walk into any drugstore and get, like you said, a Flonase. You start taking that a couple of weeks early, and maybe you start doing some different lifestyle changes, as you mentioned, maybe showering after you come inside, or just cleaning. And these are things that can really have a benefit.
They can make a huge difference, and it's tough, right? People don't know what's going on. People think they have some underlying infection, and so that's why we're here. We're here to help.
Right.
And so, like I said, the big takeaway from this is, hey, know what your season is. 2 to 3 weeks before that, start doing Flonase, and then start doing another, like the oral medications or the antihistamines, like Allegra, Zyrtec. All those are pretty big.
Yeah. All right, Ben. Well, is there anything that maybe I missed that you wanted to bring up from a doctor's perspective? I mean, hopefully we've got either individuals or maybe individuals with children watching this, and hopefully they took the information, because it was fantastic information on your part, and are going to keep it in the back of their minds, for this allergy season. But anything that I might have missed that you wanted to kind of touch on?
Another thing that I would suggest, we talked about kids and how they can, they get hit harder because their tubing, their sinuses, they're smaller than the normal. So really, you don't want to do anything else to further worsen that, like smoking. Smoking in the household causes more inflammation, and so that can worsen a child's symptoms. So make sure you're not smoking. Like, don't smoke in general, but make sure you're not smoking in the house. And so, what else? I'm just looking through.
The one thing I did want to talk to you about a little bit was, we're gonna, as I joked, we're gonna eventually be warm here, and you've got kids participating in different sports. The high school kids, maybe they're participating in more physical sports football, soccer, what have you. That heat stress is going to be something that plays a big factor coming up here in just a couple of months. So maybe for parents watching, listening, how do they in the back of their minds understand what's too much of a physical exertion in those hot months and when to pull their kids back a little bit?
That's tough. From my standpoint, if I see a kid that is struggling more than the other kids around them, that would be a sign to me to pull the kid.
Yeah.
If you're looking at, hey, how do I prevent that from happening? It's staying well hydrated.
Yeah.
I think people don't realize that there's also hydration in food. So making sure they have a good breakfast, make sure they're well fed and well hydrated are going to be the main things to kind of hopefully prevent something like that.
Yeah.
But if you think that they look, they're flushed, like if you're looking at like heat stroke signs, if they're not sweating, that's
a big one.
If they're confused, again, we call it heat stroke because they have signs similar to stroke, right?
Yeah.
And so if they're not sweating, if they're acting weird, those are all signs that you probably need to get or seek medical care. And hopefully that never happens. But again, like I said, making sure they stay well hydrated, well fed.
Yeah, this is important stuff. This time of the year we've got the allergies, but before we know it, in the month of June, July, August, even September, you're going to get those really hot days.
Yeah.
And this is great information for parents with children to understand, and even just anyone in general to make sure they're not exerting themselves too much. Well, we're going to be touching on that later into the summer months. But Dr. Ben Broker, thank you so much for joining us here on the Radar Pod. A lot of great information. And for those watching and listening, where can they find more information from you, or maybe if they have an allergy issue, where can they maybe get in touch with you for some more consultation?
So my clinic is Eisenhower Primary Care.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Radar Podcast, our downtown Youngstown studio here, a beautiful space. And we were just talking, the leaves are coming on the trees. We're starting to see those beautiful blooms, but unfortunately that means allergy season going to be ramping up as well. As always, we want to make sure that you can find that forecast 24/7 on our Storm Tracker 21 app. Of course, all of these podcasts drop once a week. We've got some great network of podcasts, and you can find those wherever you get your podcast, also on our 21 News app for that forecast. Once again, the Storm Tracker 21 app and our Storm Tracker social media platforms. We'll see you back here in May on the Radar Podcast with a great topic you're not going to want to miss. Until then, thanks for watching and listening.